Hello, hello, and welcome back. Thank you for joining us for another episode of How to Unpick Your Picky Eater. We have a really interesting topic today. We are going to be talking about picky eating and autism and how they're connected. And of course, if you have a picky eater, it does not mean that your child has autism, but many children with autism tend to be very selective eaters. So we're just going to talk about those connections today and how they can relate to kids on the spectrum, right? Um, Now, if you're new to my work, if I help parents just like you who want their kids to eat healthier, I help teach you ways to get your kids to actually learn to love food, not just tolerate it, not just to get through mealtime. We want your kids to actually grow to have a relationship with food and really enjoy it and be excited and curious about it. So if you're new to my work, you can get started by taking our quiz. It's 2 minutes at thepickyeaterstest.com. And that is going to be the easiest way to get started with us. And you will be able to learn all about the different ways that your child is going to be impacted by their picky eating and specifically where your child falls in terms of picky eating. Like what kind of picky eating is your child? Because that determines what types of things you need to learn that are going to move your child forward, right? So, without any further ado, let's jump in and get started today. So, autism and picky eating, the two things that stand out most to me are usually oral motor and sensory processing issues when it comes to autism. So, first, let's do the oral motor issues. A lot of our kids on the autism spectrum have a low tone. Their muscle tone is not great. And this might be, even you could kind of see this in their posture and how they hold themselves and how they move, right? A lot of kids get OT and PT to help with these deficits in tone. But what you see in the body, you see in the mouth. So if your child has, low core strength or, just low tone and they need OT, they need some fine motor help and maybe some PT and some gross motor help, the mouth is also as well going to be impacted by that. And the reason is truly is the tone in your body is controlled by your nervous system. And kids on the autism spectrum have impairments in their nervous system, right? In the wirings and how the connections, right, are made throughout the body. So that's why there is this pretty universal low tone that happens, with the autism spectrum population. Okay. So that's one thing. So that oral motor skill, of course, they're going to have difficulty chewing usually. They sometimes will have that tongue thrust swallow, difficulty moving food around in their mouth effectively, difficulty breaking down food with enough endurance. Okay. So things like that are really going to impact their ability to eat more fibrous foods like meats and vegetables, right? Are two most common things that our picky eaters will eliminate because they're also by chance the most difficult to break down. And on the opposite side of that, the things that they probably love are the processed foods, which are easiest oral motor wise to break down, right? So you can see how that makes sense and goes together. Now, the other issue is the sensory processing. And if you are a parent to a child who is on the autism spectrum, you probably can relate to this, but there's probably some sensory issues, whether they're oversensitive or undersensitive to certain stimuli. It might be visual, might be, smell, olfactory, it might be auditory, there's tactile, right, touching. So there's a bunch of different ways that kids can be over or understimulated. And beyond that, right, there is probably more than one area affected, right? It's probably not just one. It's not probably not just the taste in their mouth, it's probably also that their hearing and their touch and their smell. Like there's probably several different things going on. So, understanding your child's oral motor and sensory profiles are super important if you want them to overcome their picky eating. If you want them to eat more foods, you really have to have a good understanding of your child's specific profile, because once you know where their strengths and their weaknesses are, then we can either make strategies to go around that and build on their strengths while we work on their weaknesses, or make it manageable enough that we are working within their sensory system or within their skill set of their current oral motor skills, right? So in our programs, that's what we do. I'll help identify those specific areas for your child. But just know that those two things, the oral motor and the sensory, are the biggest hurdles, I guess I would say. And those two things are going to then impact the mindset, right? So even though, they might, so fear kind of comes along in that mindset, right? So they might, be very afraid to try new foods, very hesitant, very resistant, right? That's mindset, but it's stemming from those two areas, the oral motor and the sensory, that are probably, sort of bringing this fear, to the forefront. It's like, oh, I can't have that. That is way too, whatever it is, wet. And I just don't like wet, right? So that then develops that negative association with that food. Now we're not touching anything that might be wet, right? So that's just an example. But knowing those is going to be very huge and beneficial, because when we have that information, we can then make a plan to do something, right? And I find a lot of parents just don't have that information. They don't have a good handle on what their child's oral motor skills and sensory profile truly look like. So it's really hard to, develop a specific plan to work with those skills when we don't know what they are. Now, specifically, I should say especially, not specifically, especially kids with autism. You really want to talk about removing toxins and adding in nutrients. Now, of course, this goes for our regular picky eaters too, our typical kids. Everyone on this earth, I'm pretty sure, has a toxin load, but kids on the autism spectrum have unusually high amounts of toxins found in their bloodstream. Right. So we really want to talk about doing things like detoxes, pulling those toxins out of the body, and then putting in, right? There's usually some missing nutrients, right? Because they're not eating a varied diet. And a lot of parents who have kids on the spectrum do know this, but there is that gut connection with autism, right? So a lot of times they will have some sort of gut issues. They might have irregular bowel movements, or they might, have constipation or reflux or diarrhea, or all of them. They might have all of the problems, right? One week they have diarrhea, next week they can't poop, right? I have seen everything. So, specifically when we're talking about picky eating and autism, we really want to, be very holistic about it. And we're talking about pulling out some of those toxins, detoxing, adding in these nutrients that are missing, that are specifically, missing in your child's diet. Um, and improving the gut health overall, because we know that there is a gut brain connection, right? So when the gut is off, it is affecting our cognitive functioning, right? It's affecting how we learn, our mood, how we pay attention. It affects so many different things. So we want to optimize gut function and gut health, right? Especially in this population, but really with all of our kids, right? A lot of our kids they're not getting foods that have probiotics in them, prebiotics. They're missing, foods that have fiber in them. Their gut health is generally poor for a picky eater. So we really want to optimize gut health, but especially with the autism population, because there is just that such obvious, right? That gut brain connection. Their gut is very, very off usually, which means cognitively they're going to struggle, right? And you're going to see those symptoms of autism. Okay. So, when we have toxins in the body, that only exacerbates the gut problems, right? And increases that gut permeability, and there's that leaky gut. So that's that holistic approach, right? If you missed the episode earlier this month, I was talking about holistic functional feeding therapy, which I don't know, I might have invented that term, but that's sort of what I consider myself to be, because I'm really looking at all of these different components and areas that food is affecting, because nothing is in isolation of one another. So when the gut is off, the brain's going to be off. And, when you're constipated, you're probably not going to feel hungry. When you're refluxing, when you have diarrhea, you're probably not going to want to try new foods, right? It all sort of works together. So we need all of the systems a go for them to start liking food. Um, and I would say even before they start liking food, right? We need to sort of fix these underlying root issues that are occurring, to get them to that next level where we can start teaching them about foods and they're feeling comfortable and happy, because they're no longer hopefully in some kind of pain or discomfort, even if outwardly it doesn't appear that way. A lot of times when you've had discomfort from day one of your life, you don't know a life without discomfort. So you don't know how good you could feel if you had the right stuff in your system and the bad stuff was removed, right? And that does happen very often to our kids, is once those things are removed, once we do put in all of those good nutrients and things, we see changes not just in eating, but in attention and mood and regulation, and their ability to converse and socialize, right? There's a lot of things that food affects. There's a lot of things that the gut impacts in your life, right? So this is real important stuff, right? Um, Okay, so let's see. I just made some like quick little points. I think I covered most of that. Okay. And the last thing I wanted to talk about is if this is an area of struggle for you and your child, if your child is not interested in learning about foods, um, we still have this period of time where we need them to have nutrients in their body. Waiting, especially with autism, when everything is a little bit extra challenging, right? Waiting for them to start to incorporate new foods into their diet, you might be looking at some time, right? And if every day you're supposed to have certain nutrients running through your body, we don't want to wait until, months pass before they start incorporating some of those foods that have those nutrients. And a basic multivitamin is just not going to cut it. Remember, a vitamin or a supplement is supposed to be like a cover, like an extra to what you're getting from food. And food, if nutrients taken from food, nutrients taken from a supplement, your body absorbs those things quite differently. So I definitely want them to be getting it from food. When we can't, of course, supplements are great, but we do want them to start getting some of those foods in. So my program, the Picky Eater's Plate, specifically works with very limited diets. We analyze what your kids are currently eating, give you a roadmap of what is missing and exactly ways to get it into their system that works with their sensory system, so that it's not like we're forcing them to eat this new food. It's a food that they're already comfortable eating, and we have beefed it up with as much nutrition as possible while keeping the sensory properties of that food as similar or non-changed as possible. So if that is of interest to you, you can check out our website, our courses. It's called the Picky Eater's Plate. And, we have that available to you. And it's that one-to-one. We do give you a specific analysis specific to your child. And then the course comes with it. The books come with it. The recipe book comes with it. And you get all of that support. So if that's an area of struggle for you, and our bigger course is, a little out of reach, this might be a great opportunity to start getting those nutrients in, because it is so key and so important that we do, get those nutrients into our kids. This is every day they do need them. If they're missing out on nutrients right now, don't stress, but there is some ways that we can help teach you to get them into your child in a, non-pressure, non-threatening, non-scary way that works within the foods that they're currently eating. Right. So, thank you for joining me today. If you have questions, please leave them in the comments. If you DM us, or if you are seeing this on YouTube, just please leave a DM or comment, and I'll do my best to answer any questions that you might have. And hopefully we'll see you on the inside of the course. We will see you again. I'll be back next week too to talk about, can picky eating be prevented? And so I will see you then. Have a great week.
Thank you for listening to How to Unpicky Your Picky Eater. To learn more about achieving your child's feeding goals, check out Christine's website at foodologyfeeding.com. And be sure to tune in next time to How to Unpicky Your Picky Eater.